When you pour your entire life into your family, you never, ever imagine that one day they'll look at you like you're a piece of old furniture. You never think your love will be mistaken for weakness. But life, well, it has a cruel sense of humor sometimes. I'm Harold, 72 years old, and a widower. For almost a decade. For 40 years, I built a construction company from the ground up. I worked through storms, sleepless nights, and even broken bones, all to give my family a better life. Every single brick I laid was filled with the hope of earning their love and respect. But the truth, I never expected that the very people I built that future for would one day try to bury me in it. After my wife passed away, my son Daniel married Melissa, a woman with a sharp tongue and an even sharper pride. She came from money, dressed like a magazine cover, and walked as if the ground should bow beneath her feet. To her, I was just the old man in the corner, sitting quietly on the porch, a relic forgotten by time. I tried not to mind her attitude at first. I told myself she was young, maybe just finding her way in our family. But over the years, her arrogance grew deep roots, and so did her contempt for me. Every time I walked into a room, her smile would instantly vanish. Every time I tried to speak, she'd roll her eyes. And pretty soon, she found her favorite phrase to throw my way. "Dad, you're doing nothing all day. The least you could do is help out." She tossed that line around like it was a command, not a request. It was their go-to weapon to put me in my place. But one day, she finally went too far. It was a warm summer afternoon. Daniel was at work. My grandkids were playing in the yard, and Melissa was standing in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone and sipping one of her fancy coffees. She didn't even bother to look up when she said it. "I'm taking a 2-week vacation with my friends. You're doing nothing all day anyway, so you'll watch the kids." There was no question. No, please. Not a shred of consideration. Just pure, unadulterated expectation. I looked at her for a long, quiet moment, and something inside me shifted. It wasn't anger. It was clarity. For years, I'd been the quiet man in the background. The helper, the extra set of hands. The one who never complained. I let her walk all over me, thinking it was the price of peace. But now, she had finally crossed a line that I couldn't ignore. It's one thing to be ungrateful. It's another thing entirely to forget who built the very ground you're standing on. So I simply nodded, managed a small smile, and said, "Sure, Melissa. Go ahead. Have fun." But inside, I knew something she didn't. A storm had just begun to brew. She thought she was in control. She thought I was powerless, just the old man she could push around. But the truth was, I had built everything she depended on, and I was about to remind her of that fact in a way she would never, ever forget. You see, when people mistake your silence for weakness, that's when your actions have to speak the loudest. And my actions were about to cause an earthquake in her perfectly manicured world. So, Melissa packed her bags, kissed the kids a quick goodbye, and left without a second thought, dreaming of beaches and cocktails. She was so sure I'd be the perfect, obedient babysitter. But I had other plans. The moment her car disappeared down the street, I made a phone call. It was to my lawyer, a man I'd known for 30 years. "It's time," I said. "Let's start the process." The next morning, while Melissa was probably posting photos of her mimosas, a for sale sign went up in the front yard of the house she lived in. The house that I owned. The house I'd let her and Daniel live in, rent-free, for years. My phone started buzzing almost immediately. It was Melissa. I let it ring, and ring, and ring. When she finally texted, her message was frantic. "Harold, what is going on? Why is there a for sale sign in our yard?" I replied with a simple .com message. "I've decided to sell the property. You have 30 days to vacate. The panic in her next message was almost palpable. You can't do this. This is our home. Where are we supposed to go? I simply replied, that sounds like a you problem, not a me problem. You're a resourceful woman, Melissa. I'm sure you'll figure something out. But I wasn't done. The company I built, the one that provided Daniel with his comfortable, high-paying job, I owned 51% of the shares. The next call I made was to the board of directors. I called for an emergency meeting. When Daniel and the other board members gathered, looking confused, I laid out my new plan. I was restructuring the company. As part of Daniel's cushy Doolittle position was being eliminated. Effective immediately, I offered him a junior position at a quarter of his salary, doing actual, manual labor, the kind of work I did for 40 years. The color drained from Daniel's face. He stammered, "Dad, you can't. Melissa and I, the house, ... I looked him straight in the eye. For years, son, your wife has told me I do nothing. She seems to think that the life you both enjoyed just magically appeared. I'm simply showing her what happens when the nothing I do ... stops." The news hit Melissa like a tidal wave. In the span of 48 hours, her dream vacation turned into a nightmare. She lost her home, and her husband's 6-figure salary vanished into thin air. She came back early, her face a mask of fury and disbelief. She stormed into my small apartment, the one I'd moved into after my wife died to give them the big house. "How could you do this to us? To your own family?" she shrieked. I sat there, calm as ever, and finally said all the things I'd kept locked inside for years. "I did this asterisk for asterisk, my family. Melissa, I did this to teach you and my son a lesson you've long needed to learn. Respect. Gratitude. Thought my love was a doormat you could wipe your feet on. You thought my silence was weakness. You were wrong. This empire wasn't built for you to disrespect its founder. It was built on sweat, sacrifice, and love, 3 things you've shown you know nothing about." Her arrogance was gone, replaced by a desperate, dawning horror. She finally saw me, not as the old man in the corner, but as the man who held all the cards, the man she had fatally underestimated. It took losing everything for her to finally understand the value of what she'd always had. Sometimes, the quietest people are the ones who hold the most power. They're just waiting for the right moment to remind you, and my moment had finally come. The morning after Melissa dropped her little order, I sat on my porch, sipping coffee, watching the sun crawl over the fields. It was peaceful, the kind of quiet that comes just before a storm breaks. Inside my head, though, her voice echoed like a mosquito that just wouldn't quit. "You're redoing nothing, so you can watch my kids." That sentence replayed over and over, each time cutting a little deeper. For years, I'd helped them out, fixing leaky roofs, repairing their car, mowing the lawn when my son, Daniel, was too tired. I never asked for anything in return. I did it because that's what family does. But now, I realized that to Melissa, I wasn't family. I was free labor. She saw an old man, wrinkled, slow, past his prime. She didn't see the builder, the fighter, the man who once worked 12-hour days under a blazing sun so her husband could go to college. It is funny how some people only see your age until they are forced to remember your worth the hard way. That evening, she came strutting into the living room in designer clothes, her suitcase waiting by the door. Daniel was helping her pack, acting more like an assistant than a husband. She looked right at me and said, "I left a list on the fridge meals, school timings, bedtimes. Don't mess it up, okay?" I just bit my tongue. Not a single word came out. She smirked, taking my silence for surrender. Daniel avoided my eyes. He didn't say a thing, and that was the worst part. Watching your own son stand by while someone disrespects you, it breaks a man in ways words can't describe. But I smiled, because I'd already decided something that neither of them knew. See, real revenge doesn't start with rage. It starts with patience. For the next 2 weeks, I looked after my grandkids, just like she'd asked. And honestly, those little ones were my joy. They reminded me of simpler times, back when my wife and I would sit by the fire, telling Daniel bedtime stories about hard work and respect. But when Melissa returned, she didn't thank me. She didn't even say hello. She just walked through the door, glanced around the room, and said, "Oh, you're still here?" That one sentence, it lit a fuse inside me I didn't even know was still burning. The cruelest words are the ones wrapped in arrogance. They don't just hurt, they awaken something deadly in the silence. So I smiled again, the same smile that used to make my wife say, "Harold, what are you planning now?" Because this time, I was planning something indeed. While she was gone, I'd taken a quiet trip to my old office downtown. It was the company I built from nothing, the one I'd handed over to Daniel when I retired. It was my pride, my blood, and my life's legacy. But after I left, Melissa convinced Daniel to modernize things. They changed the name, updated the logo, and slowly, piece by piece, they erased me from everything. What they didn't know was that I still owned 40% of that company. Hidden shares tucked away in an old LLC I'd created long ago. The best revenge doesn't come from anger. It comes from knowing things that others don't. So, as she unpacked her bags, bragging about her girl's trip to Italy, I sat in the corner with a calm grin on my face, because I had just signed a few papers that would turn her entire world upside down. Melissa thought I was just some old man who'd lost control of his life. But what she didn't realize was that she and Daniel were living in a house I still owned, a house I'd bought under my trust's name years ago. Every single inch of that home was technically mine, and that gave me an idea. When you've built everything from the ground up, you also know exactly where to pull to make it all fall apart. That night, I called my lawyer, a man I'd known for decades. "It's time," I told him. He just chuckled. "You mean the plan you talked about when you retired?" "Exactly that," I replied. We spent the next 2 hours going over documents, property deeds, company shares, trust accounts. By the time I hung up, my plan was set. Melissa wanted me to babysit her kids while she vacated. Now, I'd make her watch as her entire comfortable life slipped right through her fingers. The very next morning, the doorbell rang. It was a courier, holding a thick envelope addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Daniel Miller. Melissa, still in her silk robe, took it with a confused look. "What's this?" she asked, tearing it open. Her face went from curiosity to disbelief, then to pure, unadulterated panic. Inside was an official eviction notice, giving them 30 days to vacate the property. My property. She whipped around to face me, her eyes wide with fury. "What is this? This has to be a joke." I just took a slow sip of my coffee. "No joke, Melissa. The house is mine. I'm selling it." Daniel rushed in, looking pale. "Dad, you can't do this. This is our home." "It was your home," I corrected him gently. "As long as you remembered it was built on respect, but you forgot." Melissa started shouting, her voice cracking. "You can't do this to us. We have kids. Where are we supposed to go?" "You'll figure something out," Primera Saeed calmly. "You're a resourceful woman." Just then, Daniel's phone buzzed. It was a notification from the company's board of directors. I had called an emergency meeting, using my 40% stake. I'd initiated a vote to remove him as CEO, citing mismanagement and a significant drop in profits under his leadership. His face turned ashen as he read the email. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. "Dad, please. The company. The company was my legacy, son, I told him, my voice firm but full of a strange sadness. I gave it to you, hoping you'd build on it. Instead, you let it become a playground for her ego. Melissa was speechless. Her designer world was crumbling right before her eyes. The house, the company, the status, it was all connected to me. The old man she thought was useless. She had made a critical mistake. She had underestimated the man who held all the cards. In the end, they moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. Daniel lost his CEO position and had to take a junior role in a different firm. Melissa had to get a job for the first time in 10 years. Sometimes they'd call, asking for help, but I just reminded them that they were young and capable. They had to learn to stand on their own 2 feet, without my support to lean on. I didn't do it out of hate. I did it to teach them a lesson about value. You see, family isn't a one-way street. It's about mutual respect, not just taking what you can get. They thought I was just an old man sitting on a porch, but they forgot that old men are the ones who built the porches they sit on. And what they build, they can also take away. Never underestimate the quiet ones, the ones who watch and wait and remember everything. Because their patience is not weakness, it's power in reserve. I said, Melissa, can we talk? She looked up, completely annoyed. What now? I just leaned against the counter and said calmly, I wanted to let you know I sold my shares in the company. She frowned, trying to look uninterested. And why would I care? Oh, I said softly, letting a little smile play on my lips. Because the new majority owner isn't very fond of entitled family members. She started avoiding eye contact, just pacing around the kitchen, pretending to be busy. My son, Daniel, noticed it too. Dad, what's going on? He asked, a bit cautiously. I smiled at him and said, just a bit of business, son. Something I probably should have done a long time ago, but deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. You know what? They say the calmest waters hide the deepest currents, and mine were finally starting to move. Later that afternoon, Daniel got a call. I watched his face shift from confusion to disbelief, and then to this silent dread. When he finally hung up, he looked at me like he'd just seen a ghost. Dad, the new owner wants to meet me. He said some policies are changing. I just nodded slowly. You should go. Face it, like a man. Melissa, who was sitting at the counter, just scoffed. Policies. Oh, please. He's bluffing, Harold. You don't have that kind of power anymore. I turned to her with the kind of smile that always made her nervous. The company boardroom was no longer the friendly ground he was used to. The new majority owner, a longtime business ally of mine named Mr. Larson, greeted Daniel politely, but with a certain coldness. They went over the financials, the future direction of the company, and then Larson slid a folder across the polished table. He made it very clear that family arrogance will not be tolerated anymore. That one sentence hit Daniel harder than a punch to the gut. When he came home, he didn't say a single word. He walked right past Melissa, went straight into his office, and slammed the door shut. I just sat quietly in the living room, petting my dog, waiting for the storm to finally break. You see, real revenge isn't loud. It whispers through the cracks of a heavy silence. About an hour later, Melissa stormed into the living room, her face red and trembling with fury. "What the hell did you do, Harold?" she shouted. I looked up at her, calmly. "I just gave the company back its backbone." "You're welcome." "I gave my son a future. And you treated me like a burden. You called me useless, lazy, unwanted. You turned my own home into a place of humiliation. Now, I'm simply restoring balance." She froze, her eyes wide, and for the first time, she had absolutely no comeback. Sometimes, revenge isn't about destruction at all. It's about education. Over the next week, the world began to crumble in slow motion. Daniel's privileges at work were cut back, one by one. The company car, gone. The unlimited expense card, gone. He had to actually work for his position again, earn his keep. And Melissa hated it. Her days of lavish shopping sprees and so-called business class vacations came to a screeching halt. But that wasn't enough. One afternoon, she stormed into the living room, waving a letter in her hand. "What is this, Harold? Some kind of joke?" I glanced at the paper, a formal notice from my attorney. It stated that the house title was being transferred to another trust for long-term estate management. That, I said, is me taking care of my property before someone else thinks it's theirs. Her jaw dropped. "You can't just take our house." "Our house," I repeated, with a dry chuckle. "Melissa, I built this home. I paid for every brick. You've lived here rent-free, eating food from my savings. I think it's time we redefine what's yours and what's mine. The best revenge is ENT, where you take paquetes in what they realize they never owned to begin with." Daniel came home later that night, exhausted, his pride fractured. "Dad, you've made your point," he said softly. "Melissa's been out of line. But this feels cruel." I looked at him, my heart heavy but firm. "Son, life sold me long ago. If you don't teach people how to respect you, they'll teach themselves how to use you." He didn't answer, just nodded, like a man finally seeing truth after years of blindness. Days passed. The house grew quieter. Melissa's attitude changed, not out of humility, but fear. Every time I walked into a room, she went silent. Every call she made to her friends ended with, "I can't talk right now." I didn't have to raise my voice or slam doors. I just existed, and that terrified her more than any words could. The loudest revenge is silence that echoes in guilt. Then, one night, I overheard her crying in the kitchen. Not soft, tears angry, frustrated sobs. "He's ruined everything," she whispered into her phone. "I can't live like this." I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered every word she'd thrown at me. Asterisk, "You're doing nothing. You're useless. You should be grateful we let you live here." Asterisk. No. She needed this lesson. So, I did what I'd been planning all along. The next morning, I called my lawyer one last time. "Transfer complete?" I asked. He replied, "Yes, sir. The new trust is active, and your secondary property is ready." That afternoon, I packed my bags not because I was leaving out of defeat, but because I wanted them to truly understand what they had lost. I left them the house, but not the land, beneath it. The land, foundation still belonged to me. Revenge doesn't always mean taking away. Sometimes it's letting them keep everything they thought they owned, until they realize it was never really theirs. When I drove away that evening, I glanced back one last time. Melissa stood in the doorway, confused, Daniel beside her, torn between guilt and pride. They didn't know yet, but soon the bills would start arriving. The mortgage would shift, the company would demand accountability, and their empire of arrogance would crumble under the weight of their own neglect. And me, I wasn't angry anymore. I was free. Forgiveness is peace. But revenge. Revenge is justice wearing a calm smile. A week after I drove away from that house, peace began to taste different, sweeter. For the first time in years, I slept without the weight of resentment pressing down on my chest. But life has a funny way of circling back. Even when you walk away, karma has a schedule of its own. I wasn't gone forever, just staying at my cabin by the lake, the one I'd built with my own hands decades ago. It was quiet there. No nagging voices, no arrogance, gust the sound of wind through the pines and the distant echo of regret slowly catching up to those who de-earned it. When you walk away from the noise, that's when they finally start hearing the silence you left behind. One morning, my phone buzzed. It was Daniel. I stared at the screen for a moment before answering. "Dad," his voice was low, hesitant. I think we messed up." I didn't say anything, just waited. Silence is powerful. It forces truth to fill the gaps. He sighed. "The company's falling apart. Larson's demanding audits. Investors are pulling out. And Melissa, she's threatening to leave." He took a deep, steady breath. "You remember, son, when you were a boy, and you broke that window playing baseball? Your mother told you to own your mistake before I came home." "Yeah," he said softly. "This is that window again," I told him. "You broke. Italiano. Now own it." There was silence on the other end, heavy and raw. I could almost feel his shame through the phone. Revenge doesn't always require shouting. Sometimes it just needs a man to hold a mirror to his own reflection. A few days later, Daniel drove down to see me. He looked nothing like the confident executive I'd once known. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes tired. He sat on the porch beside me, staring at the lake. "I thought I had everything under control," he said finally. "Melissa said you were old-fashioned, that you didn't understand how things work now." I believed her. I shouldn't have. I stayed silent, letting him find the words himself. He needed to untangle this, not on his own. "She always wanted more," he continued. "A bigger house, a more powerful position, and I let her convince me that walking over you was just a step on the ladder." He shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "She called you a relic. But you're the foundation, Dad. And I let her try to drill into it. The truth often arrives late, but it always arrives." I finally turned to him. "And what do you want from me, Daniel?" He looked at me, his eyes pleading. Help me fix this." I thought for a long moment, not out of spite, but out of caution. "Forgiveness without change is just enabling." "I will help you," I said, "but not in the way you think. I'm not going to bail you out. I'm going to teach you how to swim. You're going to face every investor, every auditor. You're going to learn what it means to build something, not just inherit it." His face fell, but a flicker of understanding ignited in his eyes. He nodded slowly. "Okay, Dad. Okay. True strength isn't about never falling. It's about learning how to get back up on your own 2 feet." The weeks that followed were grueling for him. Daniel worked day and night, not for glory, but for survival. He called me often, not for answers, but for guidance. I didn't give him solutions. I asked him questions. What does the contract say? What did you promise them? What is the honorable thing to do? He was rebuilding his company, but more importantly, he was rebuilding his character. Melissa, however, was a different story. The moment she realized the money was gone and the prestige had vanished, she disappeared. No dramatic farewell, just an empty closet and a note on the counter that read, "This isn't the life I signed up for." Sometimes, the trash takes itself out. Months turned into a year. Daniel's company didn't just survive. It stabilized. It was smaller, leaner, but it was honest. One afternoon, he came back to the cabin. He looked older, wiser. He handed me a folder. Inside was a new deed. He'd bought back the land under the house. "It's yours, Dad," he said. "All of it. Unconditionally." I looked at him. My son, no longer a boy playing a man's game, but a man who had earned his place. "The house is yours, son," I told him. "A home is meant to be filled." He smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen on his face in years. "Only if you'll come for dinner on Sundays," he said. I smiled back. "I'll be there." Justice may feel like revenge at first, but in the end, its truest form is restoration. It's not about tearing things down. It's about giving people the chance to build things back up the right way. Thanks for tuning in today. It is stories like these that remind us of the power of standing your ground and the strength found in integrity. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content. We'd love to have you as part of our community. See you in the next one. As I looked at my son, the same boy who once held my hand on dusty construction sites, the one who'd cry over a scraped knee, the reason I worked my bones to dust. In that moment, I didn't feel pride. I didn't feel pity. I felt a profound peace. "Son," I said, my voice low, "you let her take away your respect for yourself first. And once someone steals that from you, they can take everything else without even asking. Pride blinds men, but lust teaches them to see again." He nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. For the first time in years, he wasn't looking at me like a burden. He was looking at me like a father again. We sat there for what felt like hours, not speaking, just letting the soft whisper of regret fill the space between us. When he finally spoke, his voice trembled. "Dad, I want to fix this. I want to earn back what I lost. Not the money, but your respect." I smiled. "Then start by doing what a real man does. Rebuild, even when no one believes in you." He nodded firmly. Like a man ready to climb a mountain he should have never left. Real redemption doesn't begin with an apology. It starts with action. Meanwhile, Melissa's downfall was swift. Word spread through the neighborhood faster than a wildfire. Her credit cards were declined, her designer lifestyle collapsed, and her so-called friends, the same ones who once praised her, suddenly stopped answering her calls. Every empire built on arrogance eventually meets gravity. Hers came crashing down hard. One evening, an email from her landed in my inbox. It was just one line. "I'm sorry for how I treated you." No explanation. No justification. Just guilt wrapped in silence. I didn't reply, not out of cruelty, but because silence was the only answer she deserved. Sometimes, forgiveness isn't about what you say. It's about choosing not to answer when the apology finally arrives. Weeks turned into a month. Daniel started working again. He wasn't in a suit anymore, but in a construction vest. He went back to where it all began, helping manage on-site projects for Lerson's firm. It was humbling work, but it was real. Honest. He called me every few days, updating me on how things were changing, how he was saving again, cutting expenses, and relearning the value of sweat over status. Slowly, for the first time in years, I began to feel proud of my son again. Then, one afternoon, His car pulled up to the cabin. In the back seat were two small, smiling faces, my grandkids. Their eyes lit up when they saw me. "Grandpa," they shouted, running straight into my arms. I hadn't seen them in months, not since Melissa's little vacation order. We spent the entire day fishing, laughing, and sitting by the fire. It was the kind of simple happiness that no amount of money could ever buy. As the sun began to set, Daniel sat beside me while the kids played nearby. "Dad," he said, "I think Melissa wants to make things right. She's different now." I raised an eyebrow. Different or desperate? He chuckled softly. "Maybe a bit of both. But I told her she needs to apologize properly. Not to me. To you." I nodded slowly. "The hardest apology to make is to the person you once thought you were better than." Let's see if her pride could survive a dose of humility. A week later, Melissa came to the cabin. I was outside, trimming a piece of wood, when she approached. Her expensive perfume was gone, replaced by something humbler, maybe just soap and a harsh dose of reality. "Mr. Bennett," she began quietly. "Not Dad, not Harold, just my name." It was a start. She stood there, fidgeting, her eyes fixed on the ground. "I was cruel. I treated you like you didn't matter. I thought money made us more valuable. I see now that I was wrong." Her voice cracked. "You didn't deserve that." I looked up at her, not with anger or satisfaction, but with a calm sense of truth. "No, Melissa, I didn't. But I'm glad you finally understand." She wiped a tear from her eye. Can I ever make it right?" I took a long pause, then said softly, "Start by being the kind of woman your children can be proud of. That's worth more than any inheritance or vacation. True revenge isn't about hurting someone back. It's watching them become their own punishment." As she left, Daniel came outside, watching her go. "Did you forgive her?" he asked quietly. I smiled. "I don't need to. Life already did the teaching." The sun dipped below the lake, painting the sky in brilliant gold and orange. I looked out at the water, feeling the peace I'd been waiting for all along. Everything had come full circle. Melissa had learned humility. Daniel had learned respect. And I, the man they once called useless, had taught them both without ever raising my voice. That night, I sat alone by the fire, the dancing flames reminding me of memories long past. My wife's voice echoed softly in my mind, just as she used to say, "Harold, never fight for pride, fight for peace." For the first time in years, I truly understood what she meant. I didn't just get revenge, I got my peace back. And in that quiet moment, I realized that's the most powerful revenge of all. Months passed after that day, by the lake. The seasons changed, but so did something else. The way my family looked at me. I was no longer old Harold, the retired man they had written off. Instead, I became the quiet backbone they never realized they needed. Daniel started visiting often, not for money, not out of guilt, but for time. We'd sit by the lake, share stories, and fix things around the cabin. We laughed like the years of distance between us had never existed. It felt like coming home. Melissa still came by, but she was different. Humbler, softer, more human. Primera noticed she'd traded her designer handbags for a worn-out tote bag with paint stains on it. She had started volunteering at the local community center, helping single mothers find jobs. Sometimes, redemption begins in the smallest, quietest ways. True change doesn't announce itself with a trumpet. It just shows up quietly, day after day. One evening, Daniel arrived holding a set of blueprints. He spread them across the old wooden table where I used to sketch my own designs decades ago. "It's for you," he said, a proud smile on his face. Across the top, in bold letters, it read, Bennett Legacy Homes. He explained, I'm starting a construction company in your name, Dad. Not for profit, but to build affordable homes for veterans and retired workers like you, the people who built everything but were forgotten afterward. My throat tightened. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I just stared at the name. It hit me 10. Sometimes your children won't carry your money. They'll carry your message. I placed a hand on his shoulder. You don't know how much this means. Son smiled back. Because I finally understand what you were trying to teach me all those years. And for the first time, since my wife passed away, I felt that same warmth again, like she was right there, smiling, proud of the man our son had become. Weeks later, we held the opening ceremony for the first Bennett Legacy home. The air was filled with hope and a sense of community. Daniel gave a short speech, but his closing words brought everyone to tears. He looked out at the crowd and said, My father once taught me that real success isn't measured by how high you climb, but by how many people you lift on your way up. I forgot that once. He reminded me without ever raising his voice. The crowd clapped and cameras flashed, but my eyes were fixed on him, my son, no longer a reflection of pride, but of purpose. Revenge fades, but a legacy echoes through time. After the ceremony, Melissa approached me, holding a small framed photo. It was of me, Daniel, and my late wife, taken back when times were simpler, and our family was whole. I found this in one of the old boxers, she said softly. Tote, it belongs here. She placed it on the office wall, right under the company name. I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't see arrogance. I saw gratitude. I simply nodded. Thank you, Melissa. She offered a weak smile. No, Mr. Bennett. Thank you for not giving up on us, even when we didn't deserve it. In that moment, I knew. Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the loudest kind of strength. As the sun set that evening, I sat alone on the porch, watching the golden light shimmer across the lake. The air felt peaceful, like life itself had finally come full circle. I thought about everything that had happened, the insults, the humiliation, the pride, the fall, and the slow, steady rebuilding of respect. In the end, I realized something powerful. My revenge hadn't destroyed anyone. It had transformed them. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't about punishment. It's about teaching others what real value truly means. I smiled as the wind whispered through the pines, carrying the faint laughter of my grandkids playing nearby. And I said quietly to myself, they finally understand. And that's enough. Revenge isn't about making them hurt. It's about making them remember who you were all along. As darkness fell, the porch light flickered on steady and warm, exactly how my heart felt in that moment. The story had started with humiliation, but it ended with honor. Life has a strange way of teaching lessons, not through comfort, but through consequence. What my son and daughter-in-law once saw as weakness was silence. My patience, my forgiveness turned out to be the very strength they could never buy. When I sat in that empty house, the one my own son, Daniel, had thrown me out of, I thought revenge meant destruction. I thought it meant making him suffer the way he made me suffer. But as time passed, a quiet thought began to take root in my mind. Revenge doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. It doesn't need to break things to make a point. It just needs to reveal the truth. The sweetest revenge isn't about hurting them, it's about letting life show them exactly what they lost. Daniel thought he was celebrating his freedom when he evicted me. He believed that $55 million and a grand mansion made him untouchable, a king in his own right. But then, the second will surfaced. And as the truth of what a real legacy meant dawned on him, the world suddenly looked very different. That day, he didn't just lose money. He lost the illusion that power and love were the same thing. And when he finally came back to me, his face etched not with greed but with the heavy weight of guilt, I saw something I hadn't seen in him for years. Humility. It was just a flicker, but it was there. Abe and Melissa, who once looked down on me with such disdain, started to find her own path to redemption. She began helping others at a local charity, discovering a kind of wealth that can't be measured in bank statements. It's funny, isn't it? When pride burns away, what's left is our shared humanity. And that's what this whole story has truly been about. Not revenge for its own sake, but restoration. Not punishment, but a shift in perspective. Because when someone betrays you, the most powerful thing you can do is let time and truth do the talking for you. You don't always have to destroy them to win. Sometimes, you just have to let them see who they've become in the mirror of their own actions. I've learned that you can't control how people treat you. That's their choice, their character. But you can control how you rise after they've tried to knock you down. You can choose to let the pain break you, or you can choose to let it build you. I chose the latter. I rebuilt my life from the ashes of betrayal, brick by brick, day by day. And then, the most unexpected thing happened. Daniel returned. Daniel returned, not to ask for money, but to ask if he could help me build homes for others. When I saw his name beside mine on our new company sin, I realized something profound. All that pain had a purpose. It wasn't meant to destroy our family. It was meant to reset it. To strip away the greed, the ego, the false pride, and reveal what truly matters. Family, respect, and the quiet dignity of doing what's right, even when no one is clapping for you. Sometimes, life's harshest betrayals are just the universe's way of reintroducing you to yourself, of showing you the strength you never knew you had. As I look at my family, now healed, humbled, and whole, I know I got the revenge I never knew I wanted. Not through anger, not through destruction, but through transformation. Daniel once called me a poor old farmer, a label meant to diminish me. But today, when people mention my name, they say, Harold Bennett, the man who built a legacy out of loss. And that, my friends, is what real victory looks like. In the end, revenge isn't about making them pay. It's about proving to yourself and to the world that no one can take your worth from you. Your value is inherent. It cannot be given or taken away by others. So, if you've ever been betrayed, insulted, or left behind by the people you loved most, remember this. Don't waste your energy trying to destroy them. That path only leads to more darkness. Instead, build something. Build a better life. Build a stronger you. Build a legacy of kindness and resilience. Because when you rise from what was meant to break you, you don't just win, you rewrite the ending. And that, right there, is the ultimate revenge. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world. Until next time, stay strong and keep building.